Before we begin, thank you very much to Changus Khan for joining my Patreon campaign over at patreon.com/TJOmega. Thank you guys so much for the help over there. It genuinely is why the channel keeps going, and it's what allows me to keep making videos. And of course, if you want to help out for free, hit the like button, hit subscribe, let someone know if you like the video. All that helps me tremendously too. For this video, we're going to be looking at toys that were never reused ever. Now, we know Hasbro loves repaints. They love retools, and in fact, we know that the production costs are so high on some figures, sometimes repainting them is the only way to turn a profit. So it's understandable. So it makes it all that much weirder when some of these kind of slip through the cracks and never get seen on the retail shelves again, even sometimes not even as convention exclusives. Now, before we get started, it is important to note that when I mean this was never reused, I am not counting differences between the American and Japanese versions. It is still intended to be the same character. Takara just likes to go extra with their deco sometimes, so they do look significantly different, but it's still the first release of the mold in that country. It's just what Takara and Hasbro do differently at the time. So we're not including those. What we're after here are ones that were legitimately never reused in any way, shape, or form in any significant way, as far as being repainted or retooled into something completely new, or trying to refresh the character from its original release. So that said, let us begin, and we're going to start with one of my personal favorites that I understand why, but man, I wish it had been done. I love Cybertron Dirt Boss. It was one of my first Cybertron figures because I actually imported the Galaxy Force version, inch up, and I loved how the toy worked. I loved the look of it. I loved the multi-function gimmick that it had. Of course, it wasn't a popular figure at American retail because, yeah, it just like half of the toy is its backpack for the wheels. And of course, there aren't many monster trucks in Transformers in general, so coming up with a repaint that's viable, not really the easiest task. Though you do have G1 Mudslinger that would have been a great starting point if they had actually wanted to go that route. I think what makes it viable for this list is the fact that it was a Wave 1 toy that went the entirety of Cybertron without getting any repaint of any kind. That alone, I think, gives it a worthy distinction, because that is pretty unusual. A Wave 5 new tooling, I could expect that to go by without getting a repaint. Wave 1? That's weird. For number 9, it's notable why it's omitted, but I still think this had potential. So there is the matter of Energon Wingsaber never getting retooled. And now, admittedly, that's probably because Energon Optimus Prime never got a significant repaint or retooling. In fact, during Energon, they just re-released the original toy. They didn't even bother giving it a repaint. It didn't get a repaint until the Platinum edition, the year of the Snake Optimus Prime. And now you can kind of figure out why they didn't bother repainting Wingsaber for that too. But from what I remember, Energon Wingsaber was a pretty troubled figure when it was released. They didn't want to break it into parts to pack it, and they had to. They were really pushing the budget on the figure because it had to be big enough to actually, work as armor for Optimus and work in his own gimmicks and transformations, etc. So I really would have expected them to redo it at some point. And in the past, I've toyed around with the black and white just to see what I could do. It makes a pretty cool Dreadwing. It makes a really good Fallen. I feel like there was potential for the mold, especially once they did that year the Snake Prime. Unfortunately, that never came to fruition, and it is just left to my drawing board what this mold could have been. We're going to continue this trend of course that's why it wasn't reused, but this one has a particular distinction. We're talking about Incinerator from the original live-action movie line. And why does this one make the list? Well, for starters, of course, it was never repainted, remolded, or retooled in any way, shape, or form. Never re-released in any way. What makes it distinctive is amongst everything in the 2007 movie line, everything, at least as far as the main line goes, well, for the sake of argument, we will exclude all of the like Spy Gear style Transformers they did. What we look at here is everything from Legends class all the way up to Leader. And every single one of those toys got repainted or retooled in some way, shape, or form, except Incinerator. The only one out of the entire toy line. And this is, of course, a toy line where they were desperate to put new things on the shelf because it was selling faster than retailers could order it. That makes it weird. That alone makes it weird. And what makes it weirder is that eventually a Legends class Springer came out that is based on the Incinerator toy, and that actually got several repaints. So obviously there were ways they could have reused it, but for whatever reason, they did not. For number 7, we're looking at a new incarnation of a very popular character, which ended up being a very popular toy. This is Reveal the Shield Lugnut. Now, the original animated Lugnut did get a repaint, a very weird one, but it was repainted. And of course, you had a lot of people who loved Lugnut from animated. He was a really fun character to watch. It's always cool to see brand new characters be brought back into the fold and extend beyond their original fiction. I love that animated did that so many times between, him and Lockdown, of course. So, and Bulkhead, of course, I can't leave out Bulkhead in that discussion. I really do wish the Reveal the Shield one had gotten repainted, because aside from the fact it's a really cool toy, the aftermarket on it's crazy, because it is a super popular figure. And yeah, the most obvious thing would have just been to make it animated colors, because they made real world colors out of it first. Why it was never reused, I don't know. Clearly, demand was there. It's a popular character. It was a popular figure. Absolutely no clue. It just slipped away. Next up, we've got another weird distinction, which makes it qualify for this list. Back when Age of Extinction came out, Hasbro was eager to reuse just about any dinosaur mold they had lying around. We had a toy line where like old Beast Wars figures were repainted and cast as the originals, like the new Dinobots. Like it was a really bizarre idea. But through all that, they also had something called, I can't remember what the name of the line was. Someone's going to grill me for that. But the idea was a past figure along with a current version of them. And for the Grimlock set, they opted for the Energon figure because transformation and engineering-wise, it was closer to the G1 toy than, say, the Classics figure. But that left poor Swoop just doing nothing. Just like minding his own business and never getting reused, which is unfortunate because 1, Swoop was the far better toy between the two, and 2, that meant a lot of kids got a hold of that Energon Grimlock's repaint and started figuring out there's other hinges. This thing opens up. Why is there a second head in this thing? And we'll never know that they were supposed to get a second figure with it to combine. Really unfortunate that we never got to see Swoop. Also because we missed the chance of getting a G1 coloration on that Swoop too. Really unfortunate. I actually really like Energon Swoop. I wouldn't mind like a nicer version of that one, a nicer color scheme, just to have that one. We're gonna stick with Swoop now because we have to go all the way back to Generation 2. They did Grimlock, Slag, apologies to my friends in the UK, that's just what his name was, and Snarl, interestingly enough, as brand new Dinobots in Generation 2. Brand new color schemes, and they actually did several iterations. The original grays came back, the more prominent blue Grimlock, red Snarl, green Slag, those were there, and then there were other color schemes in between those two. There were like variants, really weird arrangement. And apparently they're going to double dip because there's concept art out there for a tiger stripe Grimlock along with 2 really weird, like a bright green Swoop and an orange Sludge. neither one ever saw a release because, frankly, G2 canceled a ton of toys. I got to make a whole video on how many toys G2 canceled. But it is unusual that they had plans for Dinobots, and Dinobots are always popular. So why they missed out on those two, no clue. And of course, the Dinobot molds are famously lost, and they cannot be reused. They cannot be, because they don't exist anymore. And it does take a lot of money to reproduce a mold from G1. You know, to my knowledge, they've only done it twice with Soundwave and Optimus Prime. I don't see them ever doing that again for poor Swoop and Sludge, especially now that we have modern incarnations of those figures. And rumor has it, brand new ones coming as well. Kind of unfortunate. I would have loved to have seen all like the Dayglow Dinobots together from G2, but oh well. That's what happens. Number 4 feels like a forgotten figure, but it's one of my low-key favorites from the line. We're talking about Prime Ultra Magnus, and no, we are not talking about the one that was retooled from Optimus Prime, any of the ones that were retooled from Optimus Prime. We're talking about the brand new one that they did earlier in the line. It was just like a filler Voyager figure. I'm not even sure Hasbro was aware that Ultra Magnus would be joining the show at that point. They just threw in this completely random Ultra Magnus toy that was completely new tooling, heavily based on the animated Ultra Magnus. Comes with a hammer, big components on the shoulders that were made from the front end of the vehicle. It looked like a really cool figure. Had a few problems, but nothing some modifications in the tooling couldn't have fixed. And what bugged me about it never getting reused is that there's so much potential to that figure. You could have made a really cool take on Motormaster or Thunderclash. Clench. G2 Clench would have made so much sense from that mold. Could have done it. Could have done it. Oh, it would have been beautiful. I honestly don't know why they never got around to that. It never got even remolded into any Optimus Prime. You'd think they would take any truck and remold it into Optimus at some point to get another use out of it. But for whatever reason, we never saw that mold again. Now, you're going to think this is weird being so high, but follow me here. There is a plan. One of the last figures released in Cybertron was Menosour, which was a really bizarre figure. It's basically a big hole driller that, well, let's be honest, it barely transforms. It's a very odd figure. Odd enough that in Japan, it never even got released at retail. They did it as a Takara Mall exclusive, and it was basically just a stickered over version of the American release, packaging and all. What makes it interesting is the fact that the Transformer Collectors Club used this mold as the basis for Omega Doom, which was essentially Shattered Glass Omega Supreme. And when you make that connection, all of a sudden, the mold clicks, and you start getting a whole lot of options. Aside from the fact they could have done Omega Doom as a figure, no problem. If you take that mold and realize that, yeah, like, in a weird, like, mid-2000s kind of way, it could have passed for, like, a weird version of Omega Supreme. That opens you up to not only Omega himself, but also the Omega Sentinel color scheme, and for the Omega Doom color scheme, Omega Supreme, the Action Master Elite from Europe. So it's not a mold you would expect to have such options available to it, but it did. And in the same vein as Metroplex going from a city to a construction vehicle, you could have done the same with Omega Supreme and threw in a G1 character that otherwise is very hard to use. And all it took was a little bit of clever usage of the Menosour mold. So it's unfortunate. So every now and then, they did come up with a clever usage in the Transformer Collectors Club. Not all of them saw the light of day, and I really wish this one had, because it does open up so many possibilities. And I have one friend in particular that would have been really, really happy if that Supreme had happened. At number 2, we've got a brand new iteration of a toy that was so overused back in the day. Universe 2 Dinobot was a nice figure for its time. Obviously, we've got better Dinobots since then, but as a deluxe figure, he actually does a far better job at the raptor and robot transformation than the original figure did. At the very least, it doesn't have quite as much weirdness to it as the original. But the original Dinobot was crazy with how many retools and repaints it got. You had Grimlock, you had Hardhead, you had Thrustor, you had the Cyber Beast version, and then like the Fox Kids repaints, the 10th anniversary repaints. That mold has been done to death. Here we have a brand new version of the figure at the same size, never reused. Now, to be fair, the American and Japanese versions have so much distinction you could qualify them as two distinct figures. Unfortunately, that's not how the rules of this game work. It is the same figure released in two different locations. And the fact that we never got any other Dinobot from that tooling, any of those repaints, any of those remolds, the fact that none of them came out is shocking to me. And really, like, it should have been done. Really should have been done. At number 1, I didn't even realize this was true until I double and triple checked. I managed to find a Starscream figure that has never been reused. I know, right? We're talking about the Voyager class Prime Starscream. Now, to be fair, it's a unique design Starscream, but also let's consider the fact that the toy had a deluxe version in the first edition line that was redone several times, and there's actually some really good reuses of that figure. We also acknowledge that there was a Legion class toy done of the exact same design that was also repainted and retooled. So the fact that the Voyager, which was essentially what they were pushing as the main version of the character, never got a repaint or reuse of any kind is so bizarre to me because it's Starscream. What Starscream toy doesn't get milked for a dozen repaints? You never even had a Skywarp or Thundercracker. Those are layups. Those are the easiest ones to do. And yet nothing. This is the one Starscream I can find that wasn't redone to death. And it's bizarre. It's really bizarre when you think about it because, like, at the very least, like a G1 color scheme. At the very least. No. I scoured, I double-checked, I triple-checked. All the repaints I could think of were done with the deluxe version. Or like even the Beast Hunter Starscream had a repaint in Japan. I don't know. It is bizarre to me that I could find any Starscream, the most infamously repainted toy of them all, a toy that was repainted when it first came out. The day it dropped, the day Starscream existed, he was already repainted twice. But now he has one toy I can think of at least, that has never been redone in any way, shape, or form. So of course he has to top the list. What do you think? Is there any that I missed? Is there anyone that you can think of that has never been retooled or repainted at retail in any way, shape, or form? Any figure that I should have included in here? Let me know in the comments below. And hopefully I see you for the next top 10 I do. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.